it's Rebecca, and this weekend I was at Felixstowe Book Festival with Jane and Tony, and we met up with our friend Annie while we were there. We went last year, Jane, Tony and I, and we had a really good time, and this year we weren't too sure about going, but then we decided we would because, well, why not really? It's a book festival, you get to buy books. Bought one or two or a few. Anywho, so we arrived on Saturday morning, and we had read in the brochure, I think, yes, here it is on the back. The Orwell Hotel, where the majority of the things take place, is providing a cafe for festival audiences and asks that you do not bring in food bought elsewhere. So we thought, brilliant, it's going to provide some really, really good food to save us. We'd only have to walk a little way into town to buy food anyway if we wanted to, but it would save us going out. We could kind of stay in the hotel all day. So we were very excited, and I was very hungry when we got there. So we went to the cafe and ordered some sandwiches. Jane ordered smoked salmon and cream cheese, Tony ordered cheese and chutney, and I ordered ham and mustard. Mine and Tony's sandwiches cost £4.50 each, and Jane's one cost £6. Now, if a sandwich costs £4.50 or £6, one would expect a decent sandwich. Perhaps some crisps on the side, bit of salad, push the boat out, add some coleslaw. That's a meal for £6 or £4.50. So we get served up these crappy looking sandwiches, worse than Tesco or any other supermarket sandwiches that you can buy pre-packaged for £1 or £1.50 on a plate covered in cling film, nothing on the side, no crisps, no salad, no coleslaw, nothing, just a crappy looking sandwich. So we'd already ordered and we had to pay, and I think for 3 sandwiches and 3 drinks it cost somewhere in the region of £20 odd. Go to Tesco's, you can get a sandwich, a drink and a packet of crisps for £3. This made me so angry. So we were fuming anyway, but we'd bought them. So we went outside and had our delicious £4.50 sandwiches. And mine had cheap ham, nothing interesting, and the thinnest scraping of mustard that you couldn't even taste. Couldn't even taste it. I could see that it was there because it was bright yellow, but the taste, nothing. Jane's had the thinnest scraping of cream cheese, and Tony just didn't really talk while he was eating. So first of all, for something that we were quite excited about, that is shocking. That is absolutely shocking. And then we refused to buy anything else in the hotel at all for the weekend. We went out and got our food elsewhere. Went to Tesco's and bought meal deals for £3. And the sandwiches were a lot tastier, had a lot more filling, and I'm just shocked. And I had to put that in there first because if you ever go to the festival again and it says we provide a cafe service, do not eat a thing from there. Just don't. It's expensive, tasteless, a waste of money, a waste of time, and it made me really, really angry. And I don't get angry about things that often, but that was shocking. That was daylight robbery, really. So once we'd done all of that, we then got ourselves into the festival, and Jane and I had already contacted, well, technically Jane had already contacted some people to ask if we could interview them for the Wordy Birds radio show, and they said yes, which was absolutely brilliant. So I'm going to need my booklet because I always forget what we went to see. The first one that Jane and I went to see, Jane and I went to see the same things all weekend, which was quite strange. We didn't intend to, that's just how it fell, was A.F. Harold at the library, and we got to interview him before he did his talk. And it was a talk for children, but he writes children's books and he writes adult poetry, and I saw him years ago at Latitude Festival, and he was just so strange. He's got this big beard and he's about 10 foot tall, and he just has a really strange, brilliant way with words. And I've read some of his books, and I've got some of his books that I haven't read yet, and he's just a really strange, peculiar, loud, weird looking man. But if you're going to be creative, that's the best way to look. So I bought I bought 2 of his books actually. I bought The Song from Somewhere Else, which I haven't read, so looking forward to that one. I think that's a children's book, and I think that's quite serious. a lot of his stuff is very, very silly, but I think that one's quite a serious book. And I also bought The Imaginary, which I've read, which I borrowed from the library, which is a hardback book, and this one isn't, but I can't complain. And I think I reviewed this, so I will leave a link down below to my review of this book. I did enjoy it. It's about imaginary friends and the worlds that children create and things, so that was really good. And obviously, we said, hello, Mr. A.F. Harold, please write my name and then your name in the book, because that's what you do at these things. And then we snuck in to a talk by Carol Ann Lee, Mandy Morton and Nicola Upson, and they were discussing the fact and fiction of crime writing. And Carol Ann Lee writes true crime. She's written about Myra Hindley, she's written about the Moors murders. Was that Myra Hindley? Oh, I don't know, I'm not very good with my true crime, but she's written about true real life criminals in factual books. And Nicola Upson writes fiction kind of inspired by true crime, and that was quite interesting. I'm not really a crime reader, I'm not a crime writer, definitely, but yeah, we snuck in because Jane had asked them if we could interview them, and they said that, you know, we should see the talk, but we were at AF Harold, so we had to run back, and we kind of came in late there. But then we had an interview with them afterwards. I didn't buy any books because I'm not really interested in true crime. I'll watch it on the television, but I don't read it. I have some of Nicola Upson's books and some of Mandy Morton's books, so there wasn't any need to buy them there. But we had a pretty good interview there, and then we went out for dinner. We didn't do anything else that day. Tony and Annie had been to some various other bits and pieces. Oh, Annie had been to see a guy who was doing a workshop on Oulipo, which is one of the things that I enjoy writing. I studied it at university, so I wasn't going to go to that seminar and workshop because, without sounding big-headed, I already know all about it. Well, not all about it, but I know a lot about it. I've studied it. It's what I write. It's what I do. But I did buy some of this guy's books, and his name is Mark Brayley, and he's written quite a few books, but he's written one called The Unfettered Cube and one called Stance. And Stance is a poem which is a lipogram, and he doesn't use the letter I, so I'm interested in reading that. And this one is just Oulipo poetry, so looking forward to reading that because it's always quite good. Didn't get them signed because I didn't meet the guy, because I didn't go to his talk or anything, but I just thought I would buy those anyway. And Annie, bless her, she handed me a book and she said, oh, I thought you'd like to read this. Ali Shaw, The Man Who Reigned. And I said, oh, that looks interesting. And she said to me, oh, it sounds like you've not heard of that one before. And I said, oh, I haven't heard of that one before. And she said that that was the one that she reviewed for her fantasy book for the Wordy Birds reading challenge, so I felt very silly, but thank you very much for giving that to me, Annie. It sounded very interesting, her blurb and her review of it, so I will give that a go at some point. But as you know, it takes me forever to read the books because I'm just terrible, but thank you. And we stayed over in the hotel, and I was a little bit disappointed this time round. I shared a room with Annie, and Annie noticed that the beds didn't butt up against the wall, and there was a big gap between the end of the beds and the wall because there was kind of like a radiator pipe going round, which meant the beds couldn't push up. So there was a bit of a gap there, so you kind of did worry a little bit about your head falling off. We only had one plug socket in the whole room because the other one, there were two, but the other one was plugged into the television, and the plug from the television, one of the prongs had snapped off in the actual plug socket, so you couldn't, even though you unplugged the television, you couldn't actually plug it in, so that was a bit annoying. The bathroom door didn't lock properly. It just seemed, I don't know, really quite, not shabby, it was fairly comfortable, but there were just little things wrong that I wasn't overly impressed with. The breakfast the next morning was really yummy. It was a buffet. You could have a full fry-up or fruit or cereal. So I had a little bit of everything because you've paid for it and it's food. And then Jane and I had an interview with Dean Burnett, who we were going to see a little bit later on, and his book is called The Idiot Brain, and it's a non-fiction book, and I don't tend to read non-fiction, but I'm interested in how the brain works, and for somebody who suffers with depression, I've become more aware of my brain and the way I look at things and the way the mind can create an alternate reality for you sometimes. If you suffer with a bit of paranoia or anxiety, you believe things are happening when they're not really happening. And I've known people, and people that have affected my life both positively and negatively, who suffer with mental health issues and have created realities that just don't exist. And that's been quite, you know, traumatic, being a bystander and being someone who has been affected by other people's views of reality, which just aren't true. So I wanted to go to his talk to find out what goes on in the brain, and things that are quite interesting, things like travel sickness. I only get travel sick if I try to read in the car. I can't read maps, I can't text, I can't look at the sat nav if it's on my phone. I can't do anything like that because it makes me feel sick. And it's something to do with the brain is aware that you're not moving because you're sitting still. So your body isn't moving, like your legs and your arms aren't moving. But because of the movement of bouncing around on the road, something in your ears tells your brain that you are moving. And your brain can't kind of merge those two together. The body isn't moving, but the head is. And it's something to do with your brain being so confused it thinks it's hallucinating. And it's only hallucinating because it's been poisoned. And the only way to get rid of that poison is to throw up. Which I thought was really, really fascinating, because you feel sick if you're in the car. And I try to read and I put my head down and I kind of go, oh. It's because my brain kind of can't connect the fact that I'm sitting still, but I'm also moving, which was quite interesting. So this is probably a book that I'll pick up and put down and just have a look at every now and then. And then in the afternoon, we went to 2 panels chaired by Ruth Dugdale, and they were called Male Suicide, Stories of Life, Death and Surviving, and then Panel of Liars, Novelists Talk About Deceit and Hidden Truth. And I was really interested in the male suicides one because I believe wholeheartedly that mental health still needs so much more to be spoken about. We're still so ashamed. If you've broken your leg, you're almost proud of it. You show everybody, you're like, hey, I fell off a car, or so, I don't know, I was drunk, I did something really stupid and I broke my leg. Or even simple things like having diabetes, having arthritis. We're not ashamed of our physical ailments, and we'll take our tablets to make ourselves feel better, our painkillers, that's fine. But as soon as it comes to mental health, they're still a bit like, what's wrong with you? Why have you got mental health problems? Are you crazy? Are you going to kill me? Are you a psychopath? And there's still that negative stigma attached to it. And even worse, there's such a stigma attached to being a man with mental health problems, because men are supposed to be big and strong and man up and, you know, behave in a certain way. And I think that is terrible, that women are allowed that freedom to be mentally ill with no repercussions, no mockery, nothing said against them. But if a man says that he can't get out of bed, or he just wants to sit and cry all day, or he's feeling suicidal, he should man up. He should sort himself out, pull himself together. And I think that is awful in a world of equality and feminism and all these buzzwords that get thrown around. Men are still being ignored. And I think that is absolutely awful. It is awful that anyone should suffer, but it's awful that men should suffer for fear of ridicule. And I don't like that. So it was really interesting to talk, or to listen to a talk about mental health, especially from the point of view of men, because they need as much help as we do. There should be no division when it comes to any sort of health problems. And the amount of men that commit suicide is just frightening, because they don't realise there's help, or they do realise there's help, but they're too ashamed to go and get the help. And we just need to change our attitudes on that. So that was really interesting. And Jane and I interviewed, Dan Mooney and Matt Johnson afterwards, and had a little bit of a discussion about mental health and post-traumatic stress disorder in men, all that kind of stuff that comes with stressful jobs, being in the army, being in the police force, all those kind of things where I wouldn't want to be on a front line having people shoot at me and bombs exploding and then expect to come back home and be completely well and just go back to normal. No, I would need some time to sit in a room and cry. And there's nothing wrong with that. You've been through trauma. You've been through horrific experiences. It's okay. It's absolutely fine. So I will keep talking about it because it needs to be talked about. And then the panel of liars was Ruth Dugdale again, and Michael J. Malone, and Jane Isaac. And Jane Isaac writes crime, but from the point of view of kind of more procedural things. So police procedure, which I don't really enjoy. I can't get my head around it. It doesn't interest me. I like a bit of murder. I like a bit of crime. And I like them to try and work out who's done it or why they've done it or get inside the head of the criminal. But all the police procedure just confuses me, and I don't like watching it. I don't like reading it. So I didn't get anything written by her. But Michael J. Malone's book, again, from the point of view of a man, and this is another area where men are not underrepresented, but aren't given the same kind of help and support as women. And it's in domestic violence cases. And his book is about a man who gets beaten up by his wife. And again, men shouldn't get beaten up by women. What's wrong with you if you can't control a woman? If you're going to get beaten up by a woman, you probably deserve it, blah, blah, blah. All this kind of really negative stuff. And a human being beating up another human being is wrong. It's wrong, regardless of if you're a man or a woman. Being a man doesn't make you automatically stronger and able to defend yourself. And even if you are bigger, it still doesn't matter. Any human being should not beat up another human being. And again, men are ridiculed if women beat them up. But if it was all the other way round and a man was beating up a woman, that man would just get arrested straight away. So again, these were things that I'm passionate about. I really feel that in a world that is so focused on equality, there are so many things where men are not equal to women, and men have to strive and fight and push for the same kind of respect and the attitude of society. It needs to change. It needs to change. And women can't be the victims all the time. You can't cry victim when there are a lot of men who are the victim that get no support and no help. And it's just absolutely awful. So there I bought Me, Myself and Them, which is by Dan Mooney. And it's about a guy who suffers from split personality disorder, and he lives with these monsters. And I think that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant that it's a man suffering, it's a man trying to deal with things. So I'm looking forward to reading that one. That one really gripped me. And then A Suitable Lie by Michael J. Malone, and this is the one about the guy who is the victim of domestic violence. So really enjoyed it. Had some good chats with some interesting authors, and we will obviously post those up on our YouTube, and I'll leave a link down below to the Wordy Birds YouTube channel so you can check them out in the future. But I am absolutely shattered. It was such a busy weekend, and Jane and I were walking around with Wordy Birds postcards in our hair, and Jane had one on her hat, and we kind of were walking around the town, and people were coming up and talking to us about it, which was absolutely brilliant. So we handed out some postcards, so hopefully more and more people will hear of the Wordy Birds and listen to us and all the bits and bobs and crazy things that we do. So that was brilliant. Apart from the awful sandwich at the very beginning, I had a really good weekend. It was just so much fun. Jane and I were being crazy, silly people, which was just absolutely brilliant. I was laughing, I was crying, I was feeling loads and loads of different things. So a very good weekend. So thank you, Felixstowe, for putting on another brilliant festival. Very glad I went, and stop selling me books. It's very dangerous. So have a good day, and I will see you soon.